20 toys from the 1980s. That could make you rich. Ever wonder if your childhood toys could be worth a fortune today? That action figure, lunchbox, or video game you once loved might now sell for hundreds or even thousands. Nostalgia has driven collectors to pay big money for these treasures. So, before you toss out that old toy bin, you might want to check, because hidden gold could be inside. Nintendo Entertainment System, NES. Released in North America in 1985, the NES arrived at a time when video games were struggling after the infamous crash of 1983. With its affordable price tag of $199.99, which would be about $514 today when adjusted for inflation, it quickly became the must-have item for kids, and even some adults. Today, if you still have an original NES, you might be sitting on a gold mine. A used console in decent condition can sell for around $1,100 on eBay, but the real money comes with a factory-sealed system. On February 15, 2021, a sealed NES sparked an intense bidding war on eBay, with 60 bids driving the final price up to $36,655. But it's not just the console that holds value. Classic games like Super Mario Bros. Can fetch $200 or more for an opened copy, but if it's still sealed in its original packaging, prices skyrocket. Depending on rarity and condition, these can go for anywhere between $6,000 and $177,000. And then there's The Legend of Zelda, a game that defined adventure gaming. A particularly rare 1987 variant was so sought after that Heritage Auctions sold one in July 2021 for a jaw-dropping $870,000. So if you've got an old NES gathering dust in the attic, you might want to check, because it could be worth a fortune. 1988. Happy Holidays Barbie. When it comes to iconic toys, Barbie has been a household name for decades, with countless variations and special editions released over the years. But one particular Barbie stands out for collectors, the 1988 Happy Holidays Barbie. This was the very first doll in the Happy Holidays series, a limited edition line that became incredibly popular and helped turn Barbie into a must-have holiday gift year after year. If you happen to own one of these festive 1988 Happy Holidays Barbie dolls, you could be looking at a couple $100 in resale value. But condition is everything. To fetch top dollar, the doll needs to be new in its original box, with no yellowing on the plastic window and no visible damage to the packaging. Even slight discoloration or wear can bring down the price significantly. For collectors, this Barbie represents both nostalgia and rarity, making it a prized item. Cabbage Patch Kids. When you think of 1980s toys, one name instantly comes to mind: Cabbage Patch Kids. These weren't just dolls, they were a full-blown cultural phenomenon that sent parents into a frenzy. During the 1983 Christmas shopping season, stores turned into battlegrounds as desperate parents scrambled to get their hands on one. It wasn't uncommon to see people pushing, shoving, and even fist-fighting over these wildly popular dolls. Demand was through the roof, and stores simply couldn't keep up. At their peak, manufacturers were producing around 200,000 dolls per week, yet that still wasn't enough to satisfy eager shoppers. The dolls originally retailed for around $20 to $25, but due to their extreme popularity, some stores hiked prices up to $50, which was a hefty sum for a toy at the time. If you happen to have a mint-condition Cabbage Patch Kid, you could be looking at a $2,000+ payday on eBay. Some rare editions and original 1983 models can fetch even higher prices, proving that this iconic toy craze never really went away. If you've got one tucked away in storage, it might be time to cash in on the nostalgia. Care Bears. Cabbage Patch Kids may have dominated the 1980s toy scene, but they weren't the only cuddly craze of the decade. Enter the Care Bears, a colorful group of plush bears with unique belly symbols, each representing a different personality trait. But before they became must-have toys, these lovable characters actually started out as illustrations on greeting cards created by American Greetings. Their popularity skyrocketed, leading to a full-fledged toy line, and by 1985, their own animated TV series, further cementing their place in pop culture. While many kids had a favorite Care Bear, some are far rarer than others, making them highly valuable to collectors today. One of the most sought-after figures is the Noble Heart Horse, a special character introduced in the Care Bears Cousins line. If you happen to have one in good condition, you could fetch anywhere between $200 and $300. But the real treasures are the original plush Care Bears from the 1980s, especially if they're in mint condition with their tags still attached. Some of these vintage bears have been known to sell for as much as $500 or more. Star Wars FX7 action figure. Even in the vast universe of Star Wars collectibles, some action figures hold surprising value, like the FX7 medical droid from The Empire Strikes Back. Despite appearing on screen for a mere 16 seconds, this droid still earned its very own action figure, proving that even the briefest moments in a galaxy far, far away can leave a lasting impact. Collectors know that condition is everything, and FX7 is no exception. In 2014, a mint condition FX7 action figure, still sealed in its original packaging, sold for an eye-watering $12,900. And it's not just FX7. Many of the original Kenner Star Wars figures from the late 70s and early 80s can fetch serious cash if they are well preserved and complete. However, some ultra-rare figures have an even greater mystique. Certain Star Wars toys that were never meant to be released somehow made their way onto the market, particularly in Brazil. These rare finds are so scarce that assigning them a set value is nearly impossible. Have you ever sold an old toy for a surprising amount of money? If so, how much? Bogglins. If you were a kid in the 1980s and had a love for all things weird and creepy, then you probably remember Bogglins. These rubbery, goblin-like hand puppets were designed to look mischievous and a little eerie. Perfect for kids who enjoyed the spooky side of toys. What made them even cooler was their packaging. Instead of a typical toy box, Bogglins came in cardboard cages, complete with fake bars, making it feel like you were bringing home a wild creature that needed taming. While they were a hit in their day, Bogglins have become highly collectible over the years, with rare editions commanding impressive prices. One of the most valuable? The Halloween Bogglin, a special edition that collectors go crazy for. In 2019, a mint condition Halloween Bogglin sold for $1,000 on eBay, proving that these little monsters still have a devoted fan base. If you happen to have an original Bogglin in excellent condition, especially a rare edition, you could be looking at a significant payday. So before you toss that old toy box, check inside. You might just have a small, creepy fortune waiting to be discovered. My Pet Monster. In 1986, the same company that brought us Care Bears, American Greetings, decided to shake things up with a plush toy aimed at kids who wanted something a little more monstrous. Enter My Pet Monster, a lovable yet mischievous-looking creature with bright blue fur, orange plastic shackles, and a toothy grin. It was designed as a way to appeal to boys who secretly loved stuffed animals, but wanted something a little more rugged and cool. Retailing for about $20 at the time, My Pet Monster became a childhood favorite, offering kids a pet that was both friendly and just scary enough to feel exciting. While it wasn't as massive a hit as Care Bears, it still developed a devoted fan base, and today, that fan base is willing to pay big money to own one again. A well-loved used My Pet monster can easily sell for around $100, but if you were lucky enough to keep yours in pristine condition, especially new in the original box, you could be looking at a payday of $500 or more. 1980. Topps 482 Rickey Henderson baseball card. Baseball card collecting was a huge part of growing up in the 1980s, and for those who held onto their collections, some of those cards are now worth serious money. One of the most sought-after cards from that era is the 1980 Topps number 482 Rickey Henderson rookie card. Henderson, widely regarded as one of the greatest leadoff hitters and base stealers in Major League Baseball history, made his debut in the late 70s. But it was his 1980 Topps rookie card that became a true collector's item. If you have this card in decent condition, you could easily sell it for a few $100s. But if it's in top-notch shape, meaning well-centered with sharp corners and minimal wear, its value can soar to $1,200 to $1,500. And for those lucky enough to own a gem mint, professionally graded version, some have been listed on eBay for over $30,000. So if you were a baseball card collector back in the day, it might be time to dig through those old shoe boxes. You could be sitting on a small fortune without even knowing it. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe Castle Grayskull. In 1982, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe exploded onto the scene, becoming one of the most iconic toy lines of the decade. What started as a simple action figure line quickly expanded into cartoons, comic books, magazines, and even a live-action movie, solidifying He-Man's place in pop culture history. But while the franchise had many collectibles, it was the toys that truly captured the hearts of kids everywhere. Among the most valuable pieces today is the legendary Castle Grayskull, the fortress of power that every He-Man fan dreamed of owning. Originally retailing for $29.99, it was one of the most exciting playsets of its time, featuring a working drawbridge, battle stations, and hidden traps. If you happen to have an unopened mint-condition Castle Grayskull, it could be worth $3,500 to $4,000 on eBay, a massive jump from its original price. Of course, other Masters of the Universe action figures can also bring in big money, especially if they're still sealed in their original packaging. So if you've got any old He-Man toys stored away, now might be the perfect time to see if you're sitting on a small fortune. Transformers. Few toy lines defined the 1980s quite like Transformers. These robots in disguise weren't just action figures, they were a full-blown phenomenon, thanks in part to their hugely popular animated series, which served as the perfect marketing tool to get kids hooked. And hooked they were. The Transformers toy line generated $100 million in sales in 1984, and by 1985, that number skyrocketed to $333 million, making them one of the biggest toy successes of the decade. Fast forward to today, and these vintage figures are worth a small fortune. Classic characters like Optimus Prime and Megatron commonly sell for $300 each in used condition, but if they're mint and sealed in their original packaging, the price jumps dramatically, often reaching $2,000 or more. Some figures are even more valuable. A mint-condition Starscream once sold at auction for $5,891. A Soundwave figure fetched $3,000 on eBay. If you happen to have a collection of these figures in pristine condition, bundling them together can bring in tens of thousands of dollars. What's one toy from your childhood that you wish you had kept? Rainbow Brite. In 1983, Hallmark introduced the world to Rainbow Brite, a colorful and magical character designed to bring happiness and adventure to kids everywhere. To boost its popularity, the brand launched a 13-episode animated series, which helped solidify Rainbow Brite's place in pop culture. The success of the show even led to a feature film, Rainbow Brite and the Star Stealer, which hit theaters and earned $4.89 million at the box office. The Rainbow Brite toy line quickly became a favorite among children, with vibrant dolls and accessories that captured the whimsical spirit of the character. Originally retailing for $15 each, these dolls are now highly sought after by collectors. If you have an original Rainbow Brite doll in excellent condition, it can sell for $350 to $450 on eBay, a significant jump from its original price. With nostalgia for 1980s toys at an all-time high, Rainbow Brite remains a cherished piece of childhood for many. If you still have one of these beloved dolls tucked away, especially in mint condition, you could be looking at a valuable treasure from the past. Zany Zappers. Some toys from the 1980s were all about action figures and plush dolls, but others embraced pure, wacky fun, like Zany Zappers. These were no ordinary sunglasses. They featured built-in red LED lights, making kids feel like they had futuristic, high-tech eyewear straight out of a sci-fi movie. Whether worn as a fashion statement or a cool gadget, they were a quirky favorite among kids who loved anything that lit up. Originally selling for just $5, Zany Zappers weren't exactly a luxury item at the time. But today, thanks to their nostalgic appeal and rarity, they've become an unexpected collector's item. Used pairs typically sell for around $50. But if you happen to have a mint condition pair, especially one that still works, you could see it selling for $100 to $150. With their unique blend of retro style and 80s gadget nostalgia, Zany Zappers are proof that even the strangest toys can turn into valuable collectibles. Madballs. If there's one thing the 1980s did best, it was embracing the weird and wacky. Madballs were a perfect example of that. These grotesque, eyeball-popping, slime-covered rubber balls were all about gross-out humor, which made them an instant hit among kids. Each one featured an over-the-top, creepy design, with characters like Slobulus, Screamin' Mimi, and Skullface leading the lineup. Their popularity even led to a short-lived animated series, proving that the 80s had a soft spot for the strange and disgusting. Originally, these bizarre balls sold for just $3.50 each, making them an affordable, must-have toy for kids who loved anything creepy and cool. Today, however, they've become hot collector's items. A well-worn Madball might fetch a decent price, but if you have one new in the box, you're looking at a $100 plus payday, with rare versions selling for even more. So if you were one of the kids who couldn't resist the gross-out craze of the 80s, check your old toy bin. Your Madballs might not just be weird, they could be worth serious cash. G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe may have made its debut in 1964, but it was during the 1980s that the franchise truly exploded in popularity. With the launch of the 1982 animated series, The Action-Packed World of G.I. Joe. A real American hero introduced kids to an entire universe of heroic soldiers and villainous foes. The toys themselves evolved, shifting from larger dolls to smaller, highly detailed action figures, each packaged with unique backstory cards that made collecting them even more exciting. Fast forward to today, and vintage G.I. Joe collectibles are commanding serious cash. In 2019, a set of 6 unopened Night Force figures from 1988 and 1989 sold for a staggering $5,000, breaking down to about $830 per figure. But the action figures aren't the only valuable pieces. Some of the most coveted playsets have also fetched impressive sums. In 2018, an original Missile Command Headquarters playset, still in its box, sold for $4,569. The Defiant Space Shuttle playset, originally priced at $129 in 1987, was resold for $2,850 in 2019. For collectors, G.I. Joe remains one of the most valuable toy lines of the 1980s. If you've got some original, unopened figures or playsets, you might just be holding on to a goldmine of nostalgia and collector's cash. The A-Team action figures. If you were a fan of 1980s television, then you definitely remember the A-Team, the action-packed show filled with daring escapes, over-the-top explosions, and of course, the legendary Mr. T as B.A. Baracus. The show became a cultural phenomenon, and its impact stretched beyond the screen, spawning a successful toy line produced by Galoob. The A-Team action figures were a must-have for kids who wanted to bring the show's action home. Originally retailing for about $5 each, these figures have now become valuable collectibles. A well-preserved figure today can sell for anywhere between $50 and $150. But if you have the right character in mint condition, especially still in its original packaging, the price can go much higher. Among the most sought-after pieces is the A-Team van, a symbol of the squad's non-stop action and adventure. If you have one that's complete and in great condition, it could fetch even more on the collector's market. For fans of 80s nostalgia, the A-Team toys remain a prized treasure, proving that I love it when a plan comes together, especially when that plan includes finding a valuable vintage toy. Thank you for watching our video. Which country are you from? Comment below so we and our audience can know. Dungeons & Dragons action figures. The world of Dungeons & Dragons, D&D, has captivated fantasy lovers since the game's launch in 1974. But in 1983, the franchise expanded into the toy market with a line of action figures that allowed fans to bring their adventures to life. These figures were based on iconic fantasy characters, featuring warriors, wizards, and mythical creatures that felt like they had stepped straight out of a D&D campaign. Originally, these action figures retailed for about $3.99, but today, they have become highly sought-after collectibles. Depending on the figure's rarity and condition, prices can range anywhere from $30 to $400. If you have one that's still mint in its original packaging, you could be looking at an even higher value. But the rarest and most valuable pieces aren't the standard figures. It's the prototypes that serious collectors dream of owning. These early test versions, which never made it to full production, can sell for several $1,000s each. So whether you were a tabletop gaming fan or just loved fantasy toys in the 80s, those old D&D action figures might be worth far more than you ever imagined. Knight Rider, KITT, and Collectibles. Few 1980s TV shows captured the imagination quite like Knight Rider. Starring David Hasselhoff as the charismatic crime fighter Michael Knight, the show became an instant hit. But as cool as Hasselhoff was, the real star of the show was KITT, the sleek, talking, AI-powered Pontiac Trans Am that could outrun, outthink, and outmaneuver just about anything. KITT wasn't just a car. It was a pop culture icon, and the show's popularity led to a line of Knight Rider toys and collectibles. Many kids in the 80s had die-cast versions of KITT, as well as action figures of Michael Knight himself. These toys were a huge hit at the time, and today, they are highly collectible. If you happen to have an original Knight Rider toy, especially a KITT car that still works and talks, you could be sitting on a valuable piece of nostalgia. While smaller versions can sell for a few $100s, mint condition playsets or rare editions can fetch even higher prices on the collector's market. For fans of 80s action TV, Knight Rider memorabilia remains one of the most beloved and valuable pieces of the era. So if you still have KITT in your collection, it might be time to let it hit the road for a serious payday. 1980s lunchboxes. Back in the 1980s, no school day was complete without a cool lunchbox featuring your favorite TV show, movie, or cartoon character. Whether it was Star Wars, Transformers, He-Man, the A-Team, or Rainbow Brite. These metal and plastic lunchboxes weren't just for carrying sandwiches. They were a way to show off what you loved. Originally retailing for $9.99, these lunchboxes have now become highly collectible. If you happen to have one in great condition, especially with the matching thermos, it could be worth anywhere from $150 to $200, sometimes even more for rare or mint condition boxes. Collectors are especially interested in lunchboxes that feature iconic 80s franchises and have minimal rust, scratches, or fading. If you've got one stored away in an attic or basement, it might be time to dust it off, because your old school lunch companion could now be a valuable piece of pop culture history. She-Ra, Princess of Power, Crystal Castle. In the 1980s, She-Ra, Princess of Power, broke new ground as one of the few female superheroes to headline her own animated series. As a spin-off of Masters of the Universe, She-Ra was created as a powerful counterpart to He-Man, giving young girls their own fearless warrior to look up to. With her magical sword, heroic adventures, and strong message of empowerment, She-Ra quickly became a fan favorite, and so did the toys based on the show. Among the most sought-after collectibles today is the Princess of Power Crystal Castle. This stunning playset was the ultimate dream palace for She-Ra fans, originally retailing for $32.99. But in today's collector's market, its value has soared. If you have a Crystal Castle in good condition, it can easily sell for around $200. And if it's mint, complete, and still in its original box, the price jumps to $600 or more. With nostalgia for 80s superheroes and collectibles at an all-time high, She-Ra's Crystal Castle remains a prized piece for collectors. If you still have one from childhood, it might just be worth its weight in gold. Is there a toy you think should have made this list? Let me know in the comments. M.U.S.C.L.E figures. In the mid-1980s, kids went crazy for M.U.S.C.L.E figures, tiny, rubbery, and bizarrely detailed wrestling-style figurines that were as fun to collect as they were to battle. The name M.U.S.C.L.E wasn't just for show. It was actually an acronym for millions of unusual small creatures lurking everywhere, which perfectly captured their quirky appeal. These figures were originally sold in 10-figure cans for about $3, making them an affordable collectible that encouraged kids to trade and hunt for their favorites. With hundreds of different characters, the toy line became a massive success, turning schoolyard trades into mini wrestling tournaments. Today, loose M.U.S.C.L.E figures can still be found for just a few bucks, but certain rare figures, or large, well-organized collections, can bring in a few $100s. If you happen to have a sealed pack or a rare variant, you could be looking at an even higher price. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, TMNT, comics and toys. Before they became cartoon superstars, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, TMNT, started as a gritty black and white comic book in 1984, created by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. The first issue was printed in limited numbers, making it one of the most valuable comics in modern history. If you happen to have issue number 1 in excellent condition, you're looking at a potential gold mine. These rare copies have been known to sell for thousands of dollars. Some eBay listings have even been priced at an eye-watering $150,000 to $249,000, though collectors are still watching to see if they sell at those amounts. Thanks to the comic's success, TMNT quickly expanded into a global phenomenon, leading to the 1987 animated series that made Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, and Raphael household names. The show became an instant hit, and when the action figures debuted in 1988, they were a must-have for kids everywhere. Originally retailing for $3.99, these figures remained popular well into the 1990s. Today, vintage TMNT figures in mint condition can sell for over $300 each, with rare figures fetching even higher prices. 20 most dangerous toys ever made. Not all toys bring innocent fun. Some bring real danger. Over the years, toy companies have pushed the limits of creativity, sometimes at the cost of safety. From exploding trains to toxic playsets and even finger-chomping dolls, these toys weren't just risky, they were outright hazardous. Buckle up as we uncover the most dangerous toys ever made. Model dockyard locomotive. Back in the late 1800s, the Stevens Company introduced a toy that seemed like a marvel of its time, the model dockyard locomotive. Unlike today's electric or battery-powered toy trains, this one ran on a real steam engine, just like full-sized locomotives of the era. But here's where things got dangerous. To power the train, kids had to use either kerosene or alcohol as fuel. That meant they had to light a flame to generate steam, making it go. Now, imagine a child handling flammable liquid, striking a match, and trying to heat a tiny metal engine inside their home. To make matters worse, this miniature train didn't run on tracks. It roamed freely, often leaking its highly flammable fuel as it moved. One spark in the wrong place, and suddenly, you had a runaway fire hazard zooming across the floor. It wasn't just a risk, it was practically an invitation for disaster. Whether it was setting rugs ablaze or causing accidental explosions, this toy was anything but safe. It's a wonder any of these locomotives made it out of the 19th century without burning entire houses down. Gilbert caster kits. From 1931 to 1942, the A.C. Gilbert Company sold one of the most astonishing and dangerous toys of its time, the Gilbert caster kits. These kits gave kids the power to create their own miniature figures, from lead soldiers and football players to marching bands and circus animals. With over 36 molds to choose from, the possibilities seemed endless. But there was one major problem. The figures were made from molten lead. Here's how it worked. Children would heat up lead alloy, pour the liquid metal into the molds, let it cool, and then paint their brand new creations. At the time, this was seen as a creative and educational activity, teaching craftsmanship and patience. But today, we know just how toxic lead is, especially for children. Exposure to lead can cause brain damage, developmental issues, and serious health complications. Not only was handling lead dangerous, but the process itself was a major fire hazard. Kids were working with extreme heat, risking burns and accidental spills of scorching hot molten metal. Looking back, it's shocking that these kits were ever marketed as toys. What once seemed like harmless fun would now be considered a major health and safety nightmare. Gilbert glass blowing kits. This wasn't just a science experiment or a simple arts and crafts set. It was a full-on glass-making workshop designed for kids. Sold in the early 20th century, the kit came complete with glass tubes and actual brass torches that allowed children to heat, shape, and blow molten glass into different forms. Now, glass blowing is an impressive art form that skilled craftsmen still practice today, but it's certainly not something you'd expect to find in a toy store. For good reason. The process requires extreme heat, often reaching temperatures over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That means kids were handling red-hot glass, open flames, and dangerous fumes with little more than a set of instructions. One wrong move, and they could end up with severe burns, shattered glass, or even fires. At the time, this kit was marketed as a way to teach children about science and craftsmanship. But today, it's hard to believe anyone thought it was a good idea. While the Gilbert Company was known for its educational toys, the glass blowing kit was simply too risky to remain on shelves. Gilbert chemistry sets. During the early to mid-20th century, these kits were marketed as a way for kids to explore the fascinating world of chemistry. But unlike today's safe and watered-down science kits, these sets contained real chemicals, some of which were flammable, corrosive, and even toxic. Along with the expected test tubes, beakers, and burners, children were given access to substances like potassium nitrate, a key ingredient in gunpowder, and sulfuric acid, which could cause serious burns. Even more shocking, some of the earlier kits included sodium cyanide, a chemical so deadly that even small amounts could be fatal. The experiments encouraged kids to mix various compounds, sometimes leading to unexpected explosions, noxious fumes, and serious health risks. At the time, these kits were praised for inspiring future scientists, but they also turned ordinary households into miniature hazardous materials labs. By the 1960s, concerns over safety led to a major redesign. The dangerous chemicals were removed, replaced with non-toxic and non-explosive alternatives. Today's chemistry sets are far safer, but they lack the raw power and real danger of Gilbert's original creations. Did you own any of these toys growing up? If so, what was your experience with them? CSI Fingerprint Examination Kit. When the hit TV series CSI dominated the airwaves in the 2000s, it was only a matter of time before merchandise followed. In 2007, a CSI fingerprint examination kit hit store shelves, allowing kids to play detective by dusting for fingerprints just like the pros. Sounds like harmless fun, right? Not even close. The problem wasn't the concept, it was what was inside the fingerprint powder. Testing later revealed that the powder contained tremolite asbestos, one of the deadliest forms of asbestos known to science. Exposure to tremolite can cause severe lung diseases, including mesothelioma, a form of cancer with no cure. And kids were unknowingly rubbing this toxic dust all over their hands, faces, and even breathing it in. Once the contamination was discovered, there was immediate outrage. Health experts warned that even minimal exposure to tremolite can be life-threatening, leading to the toy's swift recall. It's shocking that such a dangerous substance ever made it into a children's product, but the CSI Fingerprint Kit remains one of the most horrifying examples of toys that should have never been sold in the first place. Aquadots. In 2007, Aquadots hit the market as a fun and creative toy that let kids make colorful, bead-like designs. The concept was simple. Arrange the tiny, vibrant dots into patterns, spritz them with water, and watch them magically fuse together. It seemed like an innocent craft toy, but what parents didn't know was that these little beads contained a hidden, life-threatening danger. The problem wasn't just that young children might swallow them, it was what the beads were coated with. Scientists later discovered that aquadots contained a chemical compound that metabolized into gamma-hydroxybutyrate, GHB, better known as the date rape drug. When ingested, GHB depresses the central nervous system, and tragically, 3 children slipped into comas after swallowing these toxic beads. The Consumer Product Safety Commission quickly stepped in, issuing a massive recall of 4.2 million units. The toy was pulled from shelves, but the damage had already been done. The Aquadots scandal remains one of the most shocking cases of toxic toys ever sold, proving that even the most harmless-looking playthings can pose deadly risks when safety testing fails. Baby cages. Of all the dangerous inventions marketed for children, this one might be the most bizarre. Not exactly a toy, but certainly meant for infants, baby cages were once seen as a revolutionary way to give city-dwelling babies fresh air, by suspending them outside of high-rise apartment windows. Yes, you read that right. The idea came about in the early 1900s when fresh air was believed to be a cure-all, particularly for tuberculosis. In 1921, a patent for baby cages was officially filed, and by the 1930s, they became shockingly popular in London. Parents who lived in small apartments, particularly in crowded cities, saw them as a solution to ensure their babies got plenty of sunlight and ventilation without needing to leave their home. The metal playpens were attached to window frames, sticking out over busy streets, sometimes dozens of stories high. If you're thinking, that sounds like an accident waiting to happen, you're not alone. By the 1950s, people finally started questioning just how safe it was to dangle infants over thin air, and sales plummeted due to growing safety concerns. Looking back, it's unbelievable that parents ever thought this was a good idea, but at the time, it was just another strange, well-intentioned, but wildly unsafe invention for children. U-238 Atomic Energy Laboratory. This was not just any science kit. It was a miniature nuclear lab designed for kids. And yes, it contained actual radioactive materials. The kit included alpha, beta, and gamma radiation sources, along with 4 uranium ore samples. It also came with a cloud chamber, allowing children to observe particles moving at speeds of over 10,000 miles per second. If that wasn't risky enough, one suggested activity was a game of hide and seek with a gamma ray source. Kids were encouraged to hide the radioactive sample and then use the included Geiger counter to track it down. What could possibly go wrong? Considering how easily things get lost in a child's room, it's terrifying to think of how many of these uranium samples went missing, or worse, ended up in someone's mouth. Despite its hefty price tag of $49.50, which is over $500 in today's money, the kit didn't last long on the market. Between safety concerns and low sales, it was discontinued within just a couple of years. Mattel built Buckle Derringer. In 1959, Mattel introduced what seemed like a fun and innovative toy, the Built Buckle Derringer. At first glance, it looked like a stylish belt buckle, but with a secret twist. Hidden inside was a tiny spring-loaded toy gun that could flip open and fire when triggered. The idea was that a child could surprise their friends with a quick-draw shot by pushing their stomach against the buckle. Sounds harmless, right? Wrong. The mechanism was extremely sensitive. Sometimes just a slight movement, like stretching, bending over, or even accidental friction, could cause the toy gun to fire unexpectedly. While the bullets themselves weren't lethal, they did set off a small explosive cap, meant to mimic the sound and flash of a real gunshot. The problem? These caps could cause serious burns if they went off too close to the body. Reports of children suffering painful injuries started to surface, and it quickly became clear that this was more than just a toy. It was a real safety hazard. Mattel eventually pulled the Built Buckle Derringer from the market, and it faded into history as one of the most dangerously flawed toy designs ever made. Zulu Blowgun Game. In the 1920s, Zulu Manufacturing in Battle Creek, Michigan, released what they claimed to be a harmless game, the Zulu Blowgun Game. But as history has shown us, whenever a toy manufacturer insists something is perfectly safe, it usually means the opposite. This game came with a 24-inch cardboard blowgun and sharp, needle-like darts designed to hit a target. But there was one major problem. These darts weren't just for show. They were so sharp that they could pierce through thick double-layer cardboard, meaning they could just as easily puncture skin, embed in flesh, or even take out an eye. And the danger didn't stop there. The instructions were poorly written, especially for kids. The proper way to use the blowgun was to inhale first, then place your lips on the tube and exhale to fire. But many kids put their lips on the blowgun first and then inhaled, sucking the sharp darts straight down their throats, creating a severe choking hazard. It's no surprise that this so-called game is no longer on the market. Thankfully, modern safety regulations prevent kids from launching projectiles at their siblings, or worse, swallowing them whole. Rollerblade Barbie. Barbie has been one of the most iconic toys of all time, but in 1991, Mattel took a serious misstep with the release of Rollerblade Barbie. On the surface, She seemed like a fun, sporty addition to the Barbie lineup. But her roller skates had a dangerous feature. Each one contained a cigarette lighter-style sparking mechanism that would shoot out real sparks when the wheels rolled across a surface. At first, this seemed like just a cool visual effect, but the danger quickly became apparent. Kids would dress Barbie in flammable outfits, and when they rolled her across the floor, the sparks could actually ignite the fabric, setting Barbie and anything around her on fire. But it didn't stop there. The real nightmare scenario happened when children played with rollerblade Barbie near flammable liquids. If her sparking skates rolled through gasoline, cleaning solutions, or even alcohol, it could cause flames to ignite instantly. Thankfully, Mattel quickly pulled the toy from shelves before any major tragedies occurred. But Rollerblade Barbie remains a shocking example of how a seemingly innocent toy can turn into a serious fire hazard. Cabbage Patch Snack Time Kids. The Cabbage Patch Kids have been one of the most beloved toy lines in history. In the 1980s, they caused absolute chaos during the holiday season, with Black Friday brawls breaking out as desperate parents fought to get their hands on one. But that's not why they landed on this list. In 1996, Mattel introduced a new version called Cabbage Patch Snack Time Kids, a doll that could actually eat. It had one-directional rotating motors in its mouth and stomach, designed to pull in plastic snacks as if the doll were chewing. Sounds fun, right? Well, here's the terrifying part. The doll couldn't tell the difference between a plastic French fry and a child's finger. Once it started eating, there was no off switch, meaning if a child's finger, long hair, or even clothing got caught in its mouth, the doll would keep pulling it in, completely ignoring the terrified screams of the child. Several high-profile incidents involved kids getting their scalps painfully yanked or their fingers stuck inside the relentless chewing machine. After growing safety concerns and public outrage, Mattel issued a recall, offering a $40 refund to anyone who returned the doll. While it's now a collector's item, the Cabbage Patch Snack Time Kids will always be remembered as the doll that literally tried to eat children. Sky Dancers. In 1994, Sky Dancers hit the shelves, enchanting kids everywhere with their whimsical, fairy-like designs. The concept seemed harmless. Pull the cord, and these elegant foam-winged dolls would gracefully flutter through the air like butterflies. But reality was far more chaotic and painful. Once launched, Sky Dancers didn't exactly flutter. They shot up at high speed, spinning unpredictably in every direction. The problem? There was no way to control where they landed. Instead of gently gliding down, they often crashed into kids' faces, scratched their eyes, and even caused concussions. Over the next 6 years, reports poured in of Sky Dancers injuring more than 100 children. Some suffered facial cuts, bruises, corneal scratches, and even broken teeth. The unpredictable flight path meant that no one was safe. Parents, siblings, and even unsuspecting pets became accidental victims. By 2000, after mounting injuries and growing safety concerns, Sky Dancers were officially recalled. Swing Wing. In 1965, the Swing Wing hit the market as a wacky, head-spinning alternative to the hula hoop. Developed by Transagram Games, this toy was basically a plastic hat with a long, weighted propeller attached to the top. The goal: strap it onto your head and swing your neck and body wildly to make the propeller spin. At first glance, it looked like harmless fun, until people actually started using it. The rapid, repetitive head-jerking motion required to keep the swing wing going put immense strain on the neck and spine. It didn't take long before users started experiencing dizziness, headaches, and neck pain. But that was just the beginning. Some reports claimed that children suffered whiplash and, in extreme cases, even brain hemorrhages from the unnatural, forceful movement. and the effects weren't just short-term. Some adults who played with the swing wing as kids still complain of chronic neck pain to this day. Needless to say, this toy didn't last long. With mounting safety concerns, it quickly disappeared from shelves, making it yet another "what were they thinking?" moment in toy history. The Thing Maker, creepy crawlers. In 1964, Mattel introduced a toy that was both wildly popular and shockingly dangerous: the Thing Maker, also known as creepy crawlers. The concept was simple but exciting. Kids could create their own rubbery bug-like creatures by squeezing colorful liquid plastic, called Plasti-Goop, into metal molds. But here's where things got risky. The molds were placed into an electric heating unit that reached temperatures of 300 degrees Fahrenheit. It didn't take long before kids started getting serious burns from accidentally touching the scalding hot molds. The toy required careful handling, but let's be real, most children aren't known for their patience or caution. Many eager young crafters ended up with blistered fingers and scorched hands. And if that wasn't enough, there was another major problem: toxic fumes. As the plastic heated up, it released a strong chemical odor, and many parents suspected that the fumes were far from safe. Breathing in burning plastic vapors in a closed room, definitely not ideal for kids developing lungs. Despite these dangers, the Thing Maker remained popular for years. Eventually, it was reintroduced with safer, cooler molds and non-toxic materials. But the original version remains a prime example of a toy that never would have passed today's safety standards. PowerMite working power tools. In 1969, Ideal Toy Company released a line of miniature power tools called PowerMite working power tools, marketed as "just like Dad's, only smaller and safer for little hands." The idea was to give kids a real woodworking experience with scaled-down versions of electric saws, drills, and sanders. But here's the catch. These weren't just pretend tools. They were fully functional. Made from die-cast metal and plastic, these little machines plugged into a battery-operated terminal, giving them enough power to cut through materials like styrofoam and balsa wood. While that might sound like harmless fun, these tools were still sharp, spinning, and capable of causing injury. One slip, and a child could easily nick a finger, scrape a hand, or worse. Sure, they weren't as powerful as full-size workshop tools, but the risk of cuts and accidents was still real. It's hard to imagine a product like this making it past modern safety regulations, but back in the 1960s, the attitude toward kids and risk was very different. While some adults look back on PowerMite power tools with nostalgia, others remember them as an accident waiting to happen. What other dangerous toys do you remember that didn't make this list? Share your stories. Battlestar Galactica Missile Launcher. In 1978, Mattel released the Battlestar Galactica Missile Launcher, a toy spaceship inspired by the hit sci-fi TV show. It came equipped with spring-loaded red missiles that kids could fire from the ship. But right from the start, there was a serious safety concern, so much so that the toy came with a warning label: "Do not put or fire red missiles into mouth or towards face." If kids had actually followed this warning, things might have been fine. But they didn't. By 1979, reports of choking hazards, serious eye injuries, and even a fatality started surfacing. Tragically, a child died after accidentally swallowing one of the small missiles. That was the final straw. Mattel issued a full recall, pulling the toy from store shelves. To make amends, the company offered a Hot Wheels car as compensation to parents who returned the toy. But by then, the damage had been done. The Battlestar Galactica missile launcher became infamous, and its dangerous design led to stricter safety regulations on projectile-firing toys. It remains one of the most infamous toy recalls in history. Hop Rod, the gas-powered pogo stick. The pogo stick has been around since 1891, starting as nothing more than a simple stick with a footrest. No handles, no real stability. Over time, handlebars were added to make balancing a little easier, but that didn't stop countless riders from face-planting, twisting ankles, or toppling over. Most injuries happened simply because it was tough to master, but there was another, even scarier risk. The metal springs inside could snap mid-jump, sending riders crashing to the ground. But if that wasn't risky enough, the 1960s took things to a whole new level with a product called the Hop Rod. This wasn't your ordinary pogo stick. It had a gas-powered engine. The bouncing motion would trigger a spark plug, meaning each time you hit the ground, the engine would fire, and you'd bounce higher and higher. It was marketed as so safe that even grandparents could use it. But let's be honest, a gas-powered, self-propelling pogo stick sounds like a broken bone waiting to happen. The patent expired in 1977, and thankfully, it disappeared from store shelves. But that hasn't stopped thrill-seeking enthusiasts from hunting them down, restoring them, and bringing these dangerous bouncing machines back to life. Austin Magic Pistol. In the 1950s, toy companies were pushing the limits of what was considered safe, and nothing proved that more than the Austin Magic Pistol. On the surface, it looked like a futuristic space gun, but in reality, it was closer to a gas-powered firearm. This toy gun used magic crystals, which sounds harmless enough, until you realize those crystals were actually calcium carbide, a chemical that reacts violently with water to produce acetylene gas. When mixed inside the pistol's chamber and ignited, this reaction would create a mini explosion, launching a plastic ball at speeds that could send it soaring over 70 feet. Now, that alone was dangerous enough, but things got even worse. Since this toy relied on combustion, there were numerous reports of the gun itself exploding, sending sharp plastic and metal fragments flying. It became clear that this was not just a toy, it was a real hazard. Some states even went so far as to classify it as an actual firearm, subjecting it to strict regulations. With such a risky design and legal challenges, the Austin Magic Pistol quickly vanished from shelves. Today, it's a rare collector's item, but you'd be brave or reckless to ever fire one. Do you think today's toys are much safer, or do some risky ones still slip through? Lawn darts, jarts. In the 1960s, a backyard game called lawn darts, also known as jarts, became a popular pastime. It seemed simple enough. Players would toss 12-inch long weighted darts toward a plastic hoop target on the ground. But the problem? These weren't just any darts. Each one had a sharp, metal-tipped spike, and when thrown high into the air, they came down like missiles. What was supposed to be a friendly outdoor game quickly turned dangerous, even deadly. It didn't take long before people started getting seriously injured, some suffering deep puncture wounds, others left with lifelong damage. A 1970 court case attempted to ban them, but the toys found their way back to store shelves. The real crisis hit between 1978 and 1988, when around 7,000 injuries were reported, many involving children. Today, the original jarts are banned, but modified. Safer versions exist. However, for many, they remain a chilling reminder of how a simple game turned into a deadly hazard. Clackers, click-clacks, knockers. If you grew up in the 1960s or 1970s, you might remember the hypnotic click-clack sound of clackers, also known as click-clacks or knockers. At first glance, they seemed like a simple and harmless toy, just two large acrylic balls attached to either end of a sturdy string. The goal was to swing them up and down, making them collide and create a loud, rhythmic cracking sound. But while the noise was satisfying, the hidden danger was terrifying. The real issue? Acrylic is brittle, and the repeated, forceful collisions caused many of these balls to shatter. When that happened, sharp plastic shards would explode outward like tiny bullets, sending kids to the emergency room with cuts, eye injuries, and even broken teeth. Essentially, clackers became mini glass grenades in the hands of children. Despite their popularity, the safety risks became impossible to ignore. By the early 1980s, reports of injuries piled up, leading to a full ban in 1985. Some versions of clackers were later redesigned with softer, shatterproof materials, but the original ones remain a cautionary tale of how a simple toy could turn into a dangerous projectile. Did any of these toys bring back memories? Let me know if I missed any. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out other episodes in this series for more nostalgic treasures. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share Who Remembers with friends who love the 80s as much as you do. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.